So I really wanted to design a way to have this cross-disciplinary conversation between someone with MS, with the clinician and with an expert, and how I could design ways to facilitate this. And I looked at a lot of other services that we enjoy. We like going to restaurants, we like going to hairdressers, we don't particularly like going to the outpatient department. The outcome of that project was a speculative service called the Chronic Facility, which allows people to have conversations about issues of living with chronic disease, but also gives science and the scientists a platform to be able to communicate this.
Going to the facility, I was really scared. I kind of knew something was happening and I didn't really completely understand it. And I remember going in there and I remember sitting there and waiting. And the thing that was so nice is that we had the privacy. There were other people around, but it was like our own self-contained table. We were able to discuss it.
So I've taken some of the methods that I designed in my Masters and I've tried to tried to put them into practice in the outpatient department. Well, I'm using the technique of the Big Brother diary room, and it's a project called the Big Gold Chair. So I've put the big gold chair in a room with a camera, and a patient can go in whenever they want and they can speak to the camera, they can confess, like in Big Brother, they can just talk about how they feel, but also more specifically the aim of it is to try and evaluate the service that's being provided in the outpatient department.
She was just so nice and so careful. She didn't want to scare me, but she didn't want to make me ignorant of what the future could be. I think definitely, you can't hide things from people.
Hello, I'm Alison. I'm not a scientist, I'm a designer, and I've been collaborating with the Neuroimmunology group at Barts for the past 2 years almost. And this started when I was at the Royal College of Art doing my Masters in Design Interactions, which is really, it came from a history of interaction design, so looking at how humans and computers and phones interact, but it's developed from that over the past 10 years to thinking about the future and thinking about how we exist with services, how we exist with science, and also speculating to the future. How do we exist with things like stem cells and nanotechnology? So in my Masters, I was using techniques, creative modelling. So when I first met the scientists and they were telling me about central nervous system, oligodendrocytes, myelin, I had no idea what these things were. So I asked them to model them in plasticine. And these are some of the models on the right. After this, I asked them to then model it in food. So that's what you saw the girl doing in the film. And this was to think about the service systems that we exist in. So the healthcare service, the outpatient department specifically, you wait in a waiting room, you're called through, you're told information verbally, and then you leave and you go home with all these words. So I looked at the service system of a restaurant where you can book a table, you're a bit more in control. There's a menu of choice, you can choose the things that you want to talk about, or the things that you want to eat. And speculatively, the scientist or the expert would sit down with you and model in food. So this is what's happening inside of you. So again, it was for my degree, and it was quite creative. And so when I graduated in June, Professor Giovannoni, he commissioned me to try and improve the outpatient experience for people with MS at the Royal London Hospital. This is quite a big challenge because obviously I was using design and creative methods. I was basically an artist. And then how do you start to take artist methods and then put these into practice and actually start to quantify some change and prove it? Because again, I'm working with scientists. How can I have rigor to my work? So patient experience, it's quite a hot topic right now. And through some research, I found out there's a lot of people proposing changes and saying, okay, it needs to be changed, but what exactly is the patient experience and how can you start to prove it? So some quotes from policy were saying that too often patients are expected to fit around services rather than services around patients. Okay, so we need to look at specific patients, specific people, and what are the services that they're asking for and needing, and then how can we design the services around these needs. And also, we need systems that allow people and patients to be recognised as producers and participants, not just receivers. So can the people that are receiving the service, can they say what they want? And then services be designed that way. These type of things, they've not particularly done before, but if they are done, they're not particularly done very well because it's so hard to actually implement change, especially in the NHS. So to start off, I started doing a scoping exercise. What is the patient experience at the Royal London Hospital? What does outpatients feel like to be in? So I designed a service audit. So this is quite straightforward, doing an audit. But what I did was I specifically looked at people with multiple sclerosis. So I've met 21 people, not at the same time, one at a time at the door as they walked into the clinic. Who was the first person they spoke to? Who was the second person they spoke to? Who was the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth? Exactly what did they want to find out? What topics came up in the consultation? How long were they waiting? What were they not asked? What should have they been asked? So this is start to give me a picture of what is the actual experience like, measurably. So these are things that I could start to compare against any changes I was going to do. Some of the initial statistics that have come out of that is that the average waiting time is 33 minutes. So 7 out of these 21 people that I measured waited longer than this. One lady waited up to an hour and a half. And within the context of the Royal London Hospital, there is an outpatient transformation team of NHS managers who are trying to improve the outpatient experience as well. And so what they're trying to do is to bring the running time below 30 minutes, and also to provide beverage vouchers for anyone that's waiting longer than 30 minutes. 40% of patients that I followed were not introduced to the people in the room. And I'm sure you understand if this has ever happened to you, it's quite uncomfortable. 30% of patients were not given the choice to trainees being present. Now, obviously, I have to say this is a teaching hospital that I'm measuring. But also, it's nice to be introduced and nice to be asked. And the outpatient standard for this is that everybody will be introduced. And 52% of patients did not see their planned clinician. This can be down to the clinician might not be there because, as you saw, the professor is very busy. But then you also understand if you've got one appointment, which is 1 year apart, you're going to want to see the person that you're down for. So these are the issues that I was able to, right at the start, say, these are problems. Another way of scoping what the environment was, as you'll see, was the big gold chair. So along with the things I can count, the quantitative research, I've also done some qualitative research. So what are people saying? And instead of giving out a questionnaire, I am a designer, I designed a method called the big gold chair, which is based on the Big Brother diary room. And instead of me being present and asking people what they want, I left it up to people to say. And I tested this in the Clinical Research Centre as well as the outpatient department. So it was like Big Brother, there's the big gold chair, and there's a camera in front of you. And it wasn't just a confessional talking, it was actually, could you evaluate what do you think? Give us some critical feedback so we know what you're feeling. So instead of me watching this, it's a little bit dark, but I showed it back to the outpatient staff and the clinical research staff. And again, this was addressing the problem, how do you implement change? If you tell someone to do something, the likelihood, I'm sure there's a statistic, but the likelihood of them doing that is probably not going to be that great. But if you actually affect some sort of emotion within them, so they realise, okay, me not greeting everyone that well, that's going to affect their experience. Okay, maybe I could change a little bit. So by showing it back to, I've shown it to, in total, I think about 45 staff in the Clinical Research Centre and in outpatients. And then I got them to evaluate it. So when they were watching the films of patients talking about how they feel, they were able to say, okay, we really don't like these things that we're doing. And as a team, they were able to sit down and discuss. And it was quite actually a really good in-depth discussion about things that they don't like and things they do like. And again, determining them amongst themselves the things they'd like to change. And one of the comments was from a staff nurse saying that she has gained more understanding from the patient's perspective and the thoughts and feelings of their visit, and she's now more aware of how she can help. It was one of the comments that came up throughout the research was that when you walk into a department, the member of staff didn't always introduce themselves to you. So again, working with staff in the outpatient department, it was really how do you encourage them and remind them really how important first impressions are. When you walk into a shop, and a good shop, there's someone at the door saying, "Hi, how are you today?" You know, that makes a difference, that's what you're paying for. But when it comes to healthcare services, maybe sometimes we forget that. So I show this back to, I've tested this with the sisters and the matron in the middle. And it was about saying, okay, watching it and then again discussing and realising amongst themselves this is something that we're possibly forgetting to do and we should do with every single person that walks into our department. So I hope you can see how I'm trying to use different ways of designing, thinking about things we enjoy doing, and then coupling that with actually the importance and the need for doing this. And then asking them what their opening lines would be if they were to win an Oscar, for instance. So, "Hello, my name is Tosh Denham. I'm the matron of Outpatients. How can I help you?" And then finally, just to tell you the point I am now and how it fits all together, is to think bespokely about what happens with every clinic. So the NHS was never sat down and designed. It wasn't a great plan. And it's evolved into this architectural spaces, buildings, with these systems that exist within it. But within these systems, we can change things. You know, it's people at the end of the day. It's people delivering the service. So if, for instance, staff know that it's going to be an MS clinic, then they can start to adapt things specifically for the needs of people with MS. So, for instance, the people at the touch point of this service are the receptionists, the nursing assistants, the staff nurses, the MS specialist nurses, and then on to the professor or the consultant doctor that you're going to see. So this is the point where I'm at to say, okay, how can we fit in the human factors of what we want this to be, along with the different measurement tools of things like the Big Brother chair, James Bond methods, and can I test, prove, and improve the service in the Royal London Hospital, and then hopefully secure some funding so I can then test it in different clinics throughout England as well.